I think. So I always ask for a percentage up front. You might ask for something smaller than that, but 50% is quite common, and then 50% on completion. Deadlines, okay, every job's a little different, but yeah, this is what we've done. So there's a kind of a them and me. So I'll do the user research to get started with, the wireframes get delivered to bring your laptop, then they give me feedback by this certain date, then I give them the high fidelity, then they give me feedback on that high fidelity, and then it actually goes to user testing. And then we're allowed for a couple of weeks for user testing. This can be different, depends on how, for this project, we're going to do a lot of what's called hallway testing or over-the-shoulder testing. We're going to try and meet up with people to do physical live stuff, find people that match our persona and actually work with them. Now again, we're not going to cover full-on testing here. I've got another course for that. Check out how to be a UX designer for some of the testing techniques. But yeah, we're going to do over-the-shoulder stuff. Plus, we'll probably do some unmoderated testing where we go to, say, usertesting.com. I find is really useful, and you can just send it to them and people record themselves. It's cheap, it's quick, and it's something you don't have to organize meetings for, and you have recordings so you can snip out bits so you can show the client some of the results. Okay, then there will be a user testing and completed report, and basically just feedback about this is what happened in the user testing, these are the changes we're going to make, and you make those changes, and once the final changes have been done, we'll hand over the assets to the developer to get built, which in this case would be, I'll probably end up doing the web side of things, okay, at least the front-end web design stuff, but the app and the back-end development will have to be done by a developer, which is totally out of my zone. I'm more of the creative side, the front-end side. So yeah, that is the kind of brief that we send through to the client. Always make sure that, because I bet you, I 100% promise that this will not get hit the 4th of December. Mainly because of the feedback. Okay, so your client will see this date and say they'll do it, but things will just turn up late. And it'll just be 1 or 2 days late, and I just make sure as soon as it is a couple of days late, I revise the next timeline, okay, so that they know that it's them that pushed it out. So when it is like 2 months overdue, it's not because of me, it's because of their poor feedback. Okay, so be really kind of rigid at the beginning, saying that, yep, it needs to be here by this date, and as soon as they're late, add that to the time and just kind of push that out, because this is going to look long if it pushes over to the next year, because it is going to add like another couple of weeks in the middle over Christmas. So we should have been handing this over kind of mid-December, and before you know it, it's February. And they had in their head middle of December, so just be very clear about timelines and deadlines. Now again, this is my process. You might be working in an agency and that $4,000 just wouldn't cover their rent, so you might be starting in the $5,000 and ending in the $50,000 mark, depending on how large the project is. You might be just getting started, and you might be taking on work a lot cheaper than that. Okay, you might be doing designs for $1,500 or even $500 to get your first job. But I figured I'd show you where I'm at as a freelance UX designer, so you've got some sort of idea of pricing and timelines and briefs. Let's have a quick look at the persona that got made. Alright, so this is the persona that we built for this project. Now, the initial brief kind of a rough outline. What we've done since then is some UX research into who this person is most likely to be. And the nice thing about this particular client is that they have lots of Google Analytics and have a strong YouTube channel, so it was easy to get in there and see actual hard data about who's using the channel, who's using their product, and then talking to the client about who this potential person could be. Okay, so then what goes into this will really depend on your project. So we've given this guy a name, Peter. That's a fake stock library image, but I feel like it represents the person. We give him an age, his job title, and a place he lives. Okay, now what goes in here, what you really want to do is be able to communicate, well, after reading this, know the person. Okay, so do you need to write down the toothpaste he uses or the car he drives? Potentially, but potentially not. If it's a Prius or a Ferrari, that's kind of an indication potentially of what kind of person he is. Okay, so I've seen some personas that just get into like minutia detail. I guess what you want in there is just so you can have enough in here to kind of walk away and go, I understand where Peter's coming from in relation to my product. Okay, so it could be shorter than this, probably not much shorter, but I wouldn't make it too much longer either. So have a read through this just so you understand who Peter is while we're doing this project. What I've done for you is in the exercise files, there is a folder called Persona Template, and you can use this if you want as an Illustrator file. You can switch out the images and fonts and stuff and use it if you like. You have total permission to use it. But yeah, have a read through and see how Peter does things. So have a read through and understand Peter and its position so that when we're building an XD, we can make some decisions based on what Peter would want, not what the client wants and not what I want personally. All right, so that's the brief and personas. Let's get on to the next video. All right, so we're going to start wireframing in XD. Now, wireframing or low fidelity, okay, is the term used often. High fidelity just means the version with the fonts and the colors and the images. Okay, it looks exactly like the final product. The wireframing or low fidelity just has one font, one color, real basic layout. Now, for me, the wireframing is probably the most important part. That's the bit where me as a designer, that's where my value comes from, I guess, is working out the user flow, okay, how they get from A to B, how long it takes, how many steps, how easy it is. That sort of wireframing is where most of the value comes from for me as a designer. Even though I love the high fidelity stuff, the wireframing I find is quite important. Now, do you test the wireframes? I use wireframes to send to the client so they can check it to make sure that everything's in the right place, but I don't use it for actual testing for actual end users or the personas. You can. I find I'm quick enough at getting the high fidelity versions ready for testing, and I prefer to test with those, with all the right marketing material, right imagery, fonts, and all that sort of stuff in there. So yeah. The other thing is, in terms of wireframing, I'll do them by hand first. Like, I'll use something like this in my book. Real quick, this doesn't go to anybody but me. Okay, so I'll hold it up, the microphone disappears, and you can't really hear me. Hopefully you can see that. Maybe you can even hear me. But yeah, it's just real basic outlines. There's pages and pages of these, and I just go through and kind of flesh out the ideas, where everything needs to be going, and then start building an XD. Just quicker this way. You might prefer to go straight to computer. That's fine too. Yeah, so let's actually go get started in XD now and look at some of the UI kits. Finally, XD time. He keeps promising it. I promise next video. Hi there. This video is all about working out how wide your design should be. Okay, so we're doing website, but this works for mobile devices as well and apps. How wide should my first page be? There's some easy tricks to work it out. Let's get started now. All right, I promised you we'd get started, and we are, kind of. Let's open up XD, and the first thing we need to do is work out what to start with in terms of page sizes. So we're going to be working on a web first design, okay, because all of our users at this existing company are using the product via the website first, and only a small percentage are using it via mobile. You'll have to decide on your product and what you're doing. Yours might be mobile first, so you just start with this. For this particular course, we're going to work with mobile and then build an app, but you might be working just with an app or an iPad app, depending on what you're doing. So to get started with, just always pick this one to get started with, this 920 wide, okay, and we're going to change the size as we go along. So just click on this and it opens up a page. Let's save it. Let's go to File, Save. I'm going to put mine on my desktop. I'm going to make a new folder for it. This is my instructor. Okay, it's the folder that's going to go into. If you're on a PC, there's like a new folder icon up the top. We'll just dump it on your desktop. Now, if you are on a Mac and you can't see any of that because you're like, ooh, it looks like this, click on this little arrow here. You'll be able to see a lot more of the details like favorites. And click on desktop. I've made a folder. I'm going to give this file a name. Okay, I'm going to call it Instructor HQ. And this one's the mockup, and this is going to be v1.0. Give it versioning numbers like this. Okay, when you make teeny tiny changes, maybe spelling or just a little bit of changes, you'd resave it as 0.1. And if you make big fundamental changes, you'll change that kind of whole number there. Okay, it's just a good way of keeping track of where you're at, especially if you send versions out to a client and they're like, hey, have you done this? And you can double check they're looking at the right version and not like out of date version. Cool, save it. So in terms of the page width, okay, it says 1920, it's the pixels across, okay, the width. and that is too big for a website at the moment. Let me show you what I mean. So let's check out this website here. So you can see it stretches to the edge, but there's a kind of an internal boundary. That's why we use 1920, which is kind of like the full width of the screen that I'm using. Okay, and it's a really big screen and really common, really large size. But within here, we've got some like internal boundaries. Can you see everything kind of lines up within that little gap there? Like this one as well. You can see the color stretches to the edges, but the nav, our background does, but not the inside. So there are some sites that do the full use of the screen, which is really cool. What we can't do at the moment though is within XD, to see this one here responds, can you see it adjusts as we work along? We can't do that in XD, we just have to pick a size and design for it, and then later on we can adjust it for the different breakpoints, but really we can't make this happen until the website actually gets coded and done. We need to pick a size. How do we do that? Let's jump back into XD, so it's 1920 pixels across, so within here we need to put some boundaries. How wide should it be? There's a couple of good ways to check. So one of them is under w3schools.com. The site here is just a handy resource for web design things. If you type in browsers, so /browsers, and if you come down to browsers display, you can start looking at things like, in the whole wide world, in January 2018, what is the most common size? So in here, this is a really common size to be using at the moment. It changes all the time. It's going to jump up to that eventually, but at the moment, this is the kind of really common size. You can see 32%, 34% even of the world use that size. The next common is this. So if you hit this size and it fits within this kind of width, okay, it means it's going to look fine on this, but these lower sizes, it's not going to quite fit in. But you can see the percentage is getting quite low. Now you need to decide who your clients are. So look at your persona. Remember our guy, Dave? I want to say Dave. I can't remember. We just gave him a name. He's a technology person, so he's going to have probably this size screen. So we're going to say this and above. You know, if we use this size, it's going to cover everything. He's not going to likely have any of these lower ones. But say you're working with a site that is maybe developing countries that don't have up-to-date screens. You might go for something like this. 1024 is another common, like that's a smaller size that you want to go for. The other thing you can double check is if you're working with a client who already has a website, and you can ask for them to check out their Google Analytics. So I've asked for access to theirs. Okay, so I looked at the analytics and they gave me a sign in. They can give you like a view only access, so you can't mess around with their stuff, but you can have a look. And what you're looking for is go to the audience, check out their technology, and I'm going to look at their browser. You can see they're all using Chrome. Okay, well, it's 67% of them. What I'm looking for is screen resolution. You can see a large percentage of them are using this 1920, and you can see this 1366, a good percentage of them, and then it kind of, you can see this size here, okay, that kind of fits in between these, okay, so 1400 pixels across. So if I do this size, it's going to capture this, because they're all, and you get some smaller ones in here. Down here. So if you've already got stats, check it. The other thing you might check is, if the client comes and says, oh, let's really work on this website, you might find that really you should be working on either the mobile version first, or a mobile website version first, or an app. You can check if they've already got data like this. You can go into things like mobile, look at overview. You can see in here a huge majority of this particular website, 88% are using desktop. So if the client came to me and said, look, let's build this mobile app to refresh the site, or a mobile version of the website, I'd be like, let's look at doing the desktop first, because this is where everybody, you might want it to be mobile, but really the majority of people are using it this way. You still might end up going this way, but at least gives you some data to actually talk about rather than looking at hunches. And as well, if you were going to be testing on a product to see how well this mobile phone is going, click on devices and it will tell you, like, you can see a huge percentage of them are using an Apple iPhone, and you can do some sneaky stuff by looking at screen resolution in here to decide like what version of the iPhone people are using. The options can give it away. Old iPhones, newer iPhones. This will be an iPad. Alright, so we've decided we're going to use the size of 1366, so we're going to jump into XD and put that in. Okay, So what we want to do is we want to keep this 1920 across because we like to design, I guess, with, this is extra stuff, this is the final thing we're going to be making. We want this extra stuff on the side here because designing within the 1316 can be really tight, and I like to see what happens with the flow on the outside. So what we're going to do is just set up a column, okay, in the middle here to give us that visual guide. That's this kind of like light blue thing here. So let's do it. Have the artboard selected. You click on the name at the top. That's the click on the word here. And what we want to do is over here where it says grid, click on this, and where it says layout, okay, this drop down is, we're not going to use square. It's done more for mobile app design. We're going to use layout because it's web. Now in terms of the columns, I'm not sure what's here by default, but what we're going to do is, the easiest way to get it exactly what we want it to be, is we're going to say we want one column. Okay, and click in any other box, you can see we've just got one kind of big column here. We're going to say I want this column width to be 1366. I'm going to click in any other box. What it's done is it's worked out the padding here on either side is 277 either side. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to work within this wireframe just to this. I just want to know where those edges are, and that's it. I'm going to leave it there. You might be working to a grid system. Okay, and you might be a designer working to grids, or you might be a web designer and you have to use a framework that uses like a set of grids. It's just handy for consistency. If that is you now, change it back to 12. So do this thing first, get it the right width, and then divide it by 12 columns, click in the other field, okay, or tab out, and you can see it's just gone through and added a nice little grid. This doesn't export, okay, it doesn't preview in any of the devices, it's just here, so when you're drawing things out and you're trying to line things up, you can see it snaps to it, and it means you can start doing things where you get some consistency across, so everything fits within this grid system. We'll look at it a bit more when we get into the kind of high fidelity part of the course. So what I'd like to do though is click on the name, I'm going to turn mine back to 1, make sure it's set to 1366. What you might find is that sometimes the numbers jump around. It's because the divisions are quite hard to do. 1366 math-wise is quite hard to divide by 1920, so you might find this changes a little bit, so I'm just going to force it to be 1, 1366, I'm going to make it my default, so every time I make a new page, it's going to jump to this. The next thing we want to do is adjust the viewport height. It just means, remember when we looked over here at analytics, we looked at technology, actually let's jump to this one. Remember the kind of default display size was, where it is, 1366 by 768. Okay, so that's the kind of initial view of viewport height. Just means when somebody opens up the website on their screen, they're only going to see, they're not going to see 1080 pixels, they're just going to see 768. And return, and that little imaginary line here, it's not imaginary, it's there, but that line there doesn't print as well, doesn't come out, it's just there to show you this is your above the fold. This is your stuff that people will all see based on if they are using that screen. So you're going to make sure all your call to actions are above here, or your hero images are above this line here. Anything below here, okay, potentially has to be scrolled to see. Now what we're going to do is a bit of navigation. Okay, so the basic navigation before we move on is zooming in and out. There is a tool over here that we use. Okay, click on it, click once, you zoom in, hold down the Option key on a Mac or the Alt key on a PC, and click once and it zooms out. What you'll find is you'll never use it because you'll use the shortcut. Now we're not going to go into too many shortcuts, but there are just some that are just, the tool is too hard to use. So on a Mac, hold down the Command key, so look down your keyboard, it's the Apple key, and hit the plus on your keyboard. And that'll zoom in. Okay, if you hold down the minus, so Command key down, hold minus, it zooms out. Okay, so plus, 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 zooms in, Command, minus, 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 zooms out. If you're on a PC, it's similar, you hold down the Control key. So look down, grab the Control key, and hit plus, plus, plus to zoom in, and minus, minus, minus to zoom out. The other thing we need to work out is how to move around. Unlike some of the other Adobe products, there's no kind of scroll bars here. So look down your keyboard, grab the spacebar key, hold that down, your hand turns into a little hand, you click, hold, and drag it around. So give that a go, hold spacebar, click, hold, drag. A couple more things before we go. Because we're looking at the grids here, they're quite dark, okay, and it's hard to design over the top. So you can click on, see this little coloured box here where it says columns, click on it once, and you can pick a different color if you like. I'm going to leave mine to whatever there was. I can't remember what it was. Vaguely this color, but I'm going to lower the opacity of it. Okay, so you might pick a different color, a different hue by dragging this around. Now I've really messed it up. Okay, and just lower the opacity. So there's a hint of it, so I know where the edges are, but it's not interfering too much with my design. Okay, I'm going to click out. Two other things I want to do. Zoom out a little bit. Remember your shortcut, Command minus or Control minus on the PC. Click on the name, and what that does is it gives you the kind of overall settings for the artboard. That's what this is called, the big empty page. What I want to do is I want to be able to see the bottom slider here and make this quite long, because we're going to add lots of bits and pieces to it. You'll end up changing this depending on your content, but I just want you to make it nice and long now. Plus what we want to do is rename